I will read the notice. Board of Alders Notice, New Haven. The Legislation Committee of the Board of Alders will meet in person on Tuesday, December 10th, 2024 at 6:00 p.m. in the Board of Alders Chamber located at 165 Church Street, second floor, New Haven, Connecticut, to hear and act on the following items. 1. LM-2024-0688 Ordinance Amendment of the New Haven Board of Alders regarding the transfer of boards and commissions required by Article 7, Section 4 of the Charter from the Charter to the Code of Ordinances, including modification of the composition of the scope and composition of the Board of Parks Commissioners. Number 2, LM-2024-0535 Ordinance Amendment of the New Haven Board of Alders, amending Title 3 of the New Haven Code of Ordinances, Chapter 29, Division 1, Section 29 through 35, I, parking prohibited in certain places to change from 72 hours to 24 hours, concerning abandoned vehicles with no license plates, unregistered or inoperable vehicles, and transferring the powers, duties, authority from the New Haven Police Department to the Transportation, Traffic, and Parking Department. Per order, Honorable Ellen Kubo, Chair, attest Honorable Michael Smart, City Town Clerk. These items are on file and available in the office of the City Clerk, located at 200 Orange Street, room 202, New Haven, Connecticut, 06510. For accessibility related accommodations, please call 203-946-7651 or 203-946-8582. Public comment testimony may also be submitted via email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov before 2 p.m. on the day of the meeting. This meeting may be viewed on the Board of Alders YouTube page. I want to thank everyone and apologize for the delay in this meeting getting started. But at this time, I'm going to ask my colleagues, beginning with my colleague on the right, to introduce themselves.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carmen Rodriguez, Ward 6.
Oh, Uncle Bo, Ward 8.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Adam Marchand, Ward 25.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Evelyn Rodriguez, Ward 4.
Thank you, colleagues. So let's begin with item 1. We'll ask the makers, please come forward, state your name and address for the record, and begin your presentation. And I'd also just like to recognize our colleague from 50th Ward is here with us this evening. Just that.
Oops. Madam Chair, members, my name is Steve Mednick. I'm have an office at 142 Temple Street. I live in Hamden, and I'm here as counsel who helped draft the charter and is now doing follow-up work on some of the ordinances. And to my right is our distinguished corporation counsel, as you know. And I won't say.
Can you just please give your address?
Sure. Tricia Kane, Corporation Counsel, 32 Vista Terrace.
And I won't say, Mr. Lucas is not here, so I won't say I shall be brief, which I used to say all the time when I was on the Board of Alders. But when I come into this room, I somehow have to say it. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here tonight. The purpose of this ordinance is pretty simple. It's not a complicated ordinance at all. It's designed to transfer from the charter to the Code of Ordinances the organizational language pertaining to a number of boards and commissions: the Financial Review and Audit Commission, the Board of Police Commissioners, the Board of Fire Commissioners, the Board of Park Commissioners, the Board of Public Health, the Board of Library Directors, and the Civilian Review Board. The Civilian Review Board, we did very little in it except move it from its current place in the charter to this chapter so that all of these boards and commissions would be in the same chapter. So the language that's in here is the language that was recently updated by the Board of Alders. There's no real substantive change in civilian review, and there's really very little substantive change in any of the others. With the exception of the Board of Park Commissioners, the intent of the Charter Commission and the Board of Alders, members of the public who supported the charter, was not to engage in a wholesale modification of the current structures of these boards and commissions, but by putting them in the Code of Ordinances, you now have an opportunity to review them periodically and not wait for a charter revision to make the changes that you feel are necessary or beneficial to the public in real time through the Code of Ordinances. You can't get rid of them. The charter still mandates them, but the charter doesn't fix them in stone. It's not a monument any longer. It's now a living, breathing entity. So it gives us the flexibility to address the local concerns. The current provisions of the charter are in full force and effect and will remain in full force and effect until they're replaced by the ordinance. And there's another requirement that upon the effective date of the ordinance, an attorney has to give an opinion, an attorney designated by the Board of Alders certifying that the functions of the pertinent section pertaining to the Board of Commission have been addressed by the ordinance, and that the ordinance complies with the administrative requirements of this charter, particularly section 1 and 2 of this article. And so, I mean, I'm here to tell you as the drafter that it was drafted to comply with all of those, so that, you know, when you choose an attorney, whether it's myself or the Corporation Counsel or anybody else, God forbid that they come out with a different opinion, we should be okay on the opinion that will come out after you adopt the charter, the ordinances. The only thing I want to talk about a little bit, and I understand, I don't know whether it's being introduced from the floor or from the committee itself. I think someone's talking about change of the title for the replacement of the Park Commission. Was that something that has come up? I don't know.
We'll discuss it in our deliberations.
Or you'll discuss it then. Okay. So the big change in the Park Commission is basically the elimination of the permanent members of the commission, and which was the very clear intent of the board. I have called it a Park Preservation and Recreation Commission. I was trying to come up with something that's a little broader than what we had historically in the city, and was trying to do that, but the title is really up to you and what you think you want to convey with this new entity. So there will be a commission that is comprised of 7 members, and there will be no permanent members on the body, and the role of the commission is to engage in policy making and rules and regulations relating to the parks, dealing with the acquisition of parkland. It serves as a successor to the current commission, so that there are trusts and estates and other legal documents that need to be administered or will continue to be administered by this entity. But as I was doing the research, and the court counsel's office was helpful, the chief administrative officer was helpful as well, we could find nothing in the records of the city that would indicate that it was problematic to eliminate the 3 permanent members. My concern was, when we were talking about this during charter revision, that there might be some estate that required it, that the property was transferred in 1892, and you had to have 3 people from the East Rock neighborhood serving on this commission permanently, and that they would be replaced by people from the East Rock Park Commission for time immemorial, and that's fundamentally what has occurred. But there is no East Rock Park Commission any longer, and it's not clear to almost anybody how those 3 people get appointed from time to time. So there was no, from my perspective, no legal impediment to switching to a more traditional appointment mechanism. The only other significant change in the document was there's a series of items in Article 4, which is page 5 of 36, regarding the Police and Fire Commission. I was actually going to just move these out and put them right under the Police and Fire Commission, but I kept the format to be identical. I believe I talked to the Corp Counsel about this, and I did talk to Labor Relations about this as well. Under the current charter, there is, in the language of the charter, moving over, there's an appeal from removal, demotion, and suspension. And the belief of all of us was the collective bargaining would deal with that. And so you don't want to have a contradictory provision, whether it was in the charter or moved over to the Code of Ordinances, that might contradict the provision of the collective bargaining agreement. And so, as opposed to having two different approaches, we said, let the collective bargaining agreement govern the situation. And I think that was the only substantive change that I can recall.
Thank you.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
First, I'd just like to welcome our colleague Alfred Morrison from Ward 22 as joined us.
Anything to add?
I think Attorney Mendick summed it up very nicely. We worked together on this. Fortunately, we go back a ways and we have a good working relationship, so it made it, it was productive, and, you know, we have a very smooth path going forward. I do agree with the Parks Commission expansion, because I think it takes into account the rising importance of our parks and the use for recreational purposes, and will bring in the recreation director into the doings of the new board or the new commission. And also with respect to the elimination of the opportunity to appeal under the charter applicable to the fire commission, I think, and maybe the police commission as well. I think that makes a lot of sense, because collective bargaining processes can certainly handle whatever issues come out of actions by the police and fire commission.
Can I add just one thing? And this originally came from the Corporation Counsel, but I also want to give Misty some credit on this as well, because she did a very nice job editing the document that I submitted to you. The document's probably longer today than it was when I submitted it. I don't know if anybody noticed that. It went from approximately 16 pages to 36 pages.
Mm-hmm.
The reason for that is the Corporation Counsel had discovered and brought to my attention a couple of sections where there's reference to the Parks Commission in that section. We just thought, let's clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no substantive changes in that section. All we did was change the name of the commission. And I think we might have done a couple of other little edits as we saw the need for them, but we didn't go nuts on it. But I wanted to explain why the document doubled in size.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Are there any questions from members of the committee?
I have a couple, Madam Chair, to kind of set the conversation.
Yes, absolutely.
And so would you, thank you for your presentation.
My pleasure, Mr. Majority.
Would you, I'm not sure, but this is part of our pack, which wasn't part of the overall. Would you just explain the 2 pages that were given to us?
Mr. These ones you were just showing me a little while ago? Yeah, those are different. The letter, the opinion letter, that's a section that's in the charter, so that if you want to consolidate any boards and commissions that are in the charter, that remain in the charter, you can do it, but you have to get the opinion of the Corporation Counsel. We might have wanted to look at that section a little bit more, because there can be I don't think any commissions are going to be left in the charter. The provision that governs this is Section 3A of Article 15, the sunset provision at the back of the charter. Remember, we set up a section, Mr. Majority Leader, and I call it the disappearing charter section, so that when this is approved, we will have the ability, we'll probably hold off until we do the boards, the department stuff as well. Might as well do it in one fell swoop, as we probably should refile with the Secretary of the State, and they'll be very confused getting a charter without charter revision. But we have a self-executing disappearing section of the charter. And so it was set up a little differently than the language that's in the body of the document. I will look at that language. I'm grateful that Misty brought it to our attention, because it may not be applicable any longer, but very clearly subsection 5A or subsection 3A of Article 15 is a section that applies.
And then if I can just kind of set it, perhaps, Madam Chair, it would be good to talk about the parks first.
Yes.
And then I have some other questions on the merger. That might.
Absolutely, Vice Chair, please take your seat.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the new title is Parks Preservation and Recreation.
Commission.
So it's going to, thank you, it's going to be together with the youth department, but I think the way we have separated it in our last charter revision, in our last budget, is the youth department now does their own set of recreation that is not linked in with the parks department. And I'm just wondering what the youth department would have with this, because they have their own commission. So there is a youth commission.
There is a youth commission?
And then my other thought is in our last budget, we took the recreation part of parks from the youth department and we put it into the parks department. And that section has nothing to do with youth. It deals, well, it does, but it deals more with parks, facilities, and programs. Where, and so now that's been moved over to the parks department. So I didn't want there to be any confusion or any mixing together with the youth commission and then the parks department having a recreation side. My other question was with the
Preservation.
What Alden Morrison said. We do have a committee or a board that does preservation, that does that function through LCI, which is our historic district.
And they deal with parks, not just.
They don't deal with parks.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking of names,
Titles, and confusion.
things coming
Yeah.
together.
Gotcha.
People are saying you're crossing over into our lane. And so those are the two that I can think of just right now. That might cause a conflict, more specifically with the youth department, because they have a youth commission and they deal with activities that are for the youth. And now the parks department that now has parks recreation or programming, parks programming, and their buildings. So I'm wondering if we may want to consider a different name that would encompass parks, programming, and facilities.
Well, I certainly think, and this is just off the top of my head here, but I certainly think we wouldn't want recreation to just be limited to the youth department. Because there's certainly a lot of needs, obviously, among adults, once we all age out of the youth department, for continued ability to use the parks for recreation. So I think we need, and the youth department would continue to use the parks for recreation. So I think we need to include some sort of descriptor that would take into account all age groups of people, so that it would be inclusive as to everybody. And I don't know off the top of my head how much the youth commission, they deal with general issues that relate to youth. So I don't think they're specifically limited to recreation. Because as I understand, the acronym is YARD, so it's Youth and Recreation Department. So I don't know, I don't believe they're limited to recreation. They're their view of the youth commission, as I understand it, is that it's, takes into account any issue that deals with young people.
So
But
I think my broader question is, why should we include the youth director as part of the Parks Commission as an agency that the Parks Commission would collaborate with? Because the youth department will not be doing any activities in the parks as under the Parks Commission. I would think we would want the youth department to be able to do their own programming without having to consult with the Parks Commission in order to do those programs.
But if they wanted to use the parks, they would come to the park commission. But they would do it on their own volition. It would be,
I think it will be on their own volition as a department, as a city department.
I would like to quickly, for the record, that Alder Sagan has joined us. Welcome.
And I wanted to just bring that
Mr.
up,
Bishop, yes.
Madam Chair, before we go into deliberation, to just get legal counsel before we,
that's entirely a policy call. I think, when I was instructed on this,
What's more?
well, now I've got a cough drop. It's not a gummy, it's a cough drop. So, just for the record, I just want to point out, he protested too much, yes. It's really a policy question for you. I was under the impression that you wanted to try to have that closer and more closely aligned, and that's the only reason it was in the document. So if you want to separate it, segment it, and you believe that, but I think that what would happen is if they want to use park facilities, then they would be coming before the park commission, the park entity, just like anybody else who wants to use the facilities. I think the initial impression was if you combined it, it just becomes part of the park programming, and that's why the director of youth is included as somebody you should be talking to aside from the park director. But that's a policy call, not a legal call.
and I think I'll end with that for now, Madam Chair. I give that to you.
Thank you. On my queue, I have Alder Marchand and then Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate all the effort you put into this. I wanted to talk about definitely two, maybe three things. The first of which is what we were just speaking about. I noticed in the draft language around the parks, the new Parks Commission, let's call it that for the moment,
Whatever the entity is.
that you abolish the current commission.
Correct.
And I take that to be an important step in order to eliminate the lifetime appointments.
That is correct. In order to eliminate the lifetime appointments, you need to abolish the commission. And the charter authorized that. This ordinance implements it.
So when we are in deliberations, we should give thought to the name of it so that it's distinguishable from the body that it will replace. That seems like a practical
That's why I used
consideration.
preservation. I was trying to come up with something. There was no.
We could just call it the new Parks Commission,
You call it-
which we may not do, but it would be different than the old one. But I think it would be confusing to have the new body with the exact same name as the body. it's
Yeah,
replacing.
well, it doesn't have the exact same name, but Parks is in the name. So if you can come up with a better title, God bless
We
you.
may do that, but thank you for your efforts.
Thank you.
But abolishing the current body is the way that, because the issue was, can you deprive someone of an entitlement, which was a lifetime appointment?
Correct.
But if the body's abolished, then that
You're
appointment
abolishing
ends
the body.
along with everybody else's appointments.
And we tried to have powers that were different enough so that it was a different entity. But as a matter of policy, I think the community wanted to move on from there, but you have to abolish the other entity.
Thank you. I want to talk about police and fire. You touched upon this earlier about removing something from it. The portion that's removed is not in our draft, but I think we're talking about page 5 and 6, section 2¼ -23, removal, demotion, suspension. That's the power of the commission upon the recommendation of the chief typically to impose discipline or remove a uniformed officer from either service. And then there's a procedure, which is section 2¼ -23. The same, it's interesting, it has the same section number. So you removed some section that must have immediately followed that about an appeals process?
Yeah, and so removal is still there, the authorized procedure is still there. The old section 5, 6, and 7, which is appeal from removal, motion, suspension, is gone. And the belief, based on our conversations with the chiefs, was that those could be governed by collective bargaining. Or if it's not governed by collective bargaining, they have civil rights to be able to do what they need to do. But I think that the general feeling was, why create the confusion of this provision? No one was aware of the provision being used in all the years it was in the charter, and so it just became kind of a nullity. We left the other provisions to retain those authorities for those commissions, but the appeal is an appeal that can either be governed by a collective bargaining agreement or by appealing into court, which you have the right to do in administrative appeal.
So that I don't know enough about what the contractual process is. I know what it is for other unions, but for this union, does the commission have any role in the contractual appeal processes, or does it go to labor relations and an arbitrator?
It goes through labor relations, through the regular grievance process.
And so the commission has no role in that.
Well, once they make their decision, then whatever grievance is filed by the union goes through the regular process that's governed by the state labor laws.
And keep in mind, these are appointments and promotions, and so they're not normally governed by collective bargaining. This is not discipline, this is appointments and promotions.
Well, we were talking about removal, demotion, and
Yeah,
suspension,
and suspensions, yeah.
which would clearly be disciplinary, whereas appointments and promotions.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, I'm a little bit, just in the draft, I'm wondering about the numeration here, because we have 2.25-22, vote required for appointments and promotions, and then it has subsection A and B, one for the police, one for fire. And then this one, these two paragraphs are both section 23.
Oh, they shouldn't be.
But they're not, there's no assigned subsections for them. So would that be prudent to do?
Well,
Or sometimes you could have a
no,
section
it should
that
be
has multiple
23, it should be
paragraphs.
23 and 24,
Okay,
is what it is, yeah.
okay.
It should be 23 and 24.
So the authorized procedure should be section 2.25-20.
Yeah, and then the last one will be 2.25, 25, 2-29 reserve.
Okay.
So I'd make those changes.
Oh, Madam Chair, just for a point of clarification, if Alderman Marchand will give everyone the page number that he's referencing in our red line.
It's page 6 of 36, I believe.
6 of 36 or 31 of 58.
Or 32.
Oh, I have a different.
Yeah.
This is in addition to our packet, which was not available until today. So it is page 32 of 58 in the packet I have, or page 6 of 36.
Sorry.
And yes, so, and then this whole thing is going to be section Schedule A, right? Because we got an order that makes the ordinance amendment resolution, and then it refers to the Schedule A. So all of this will be Schedule A. Yeah, okay, so yeah, I'm just trying to think through if I have any more questions about the merit of doing it that way or not, and I think at this point I don't. So then my last question is, was it simply a matter of cutting and pasting and numbering, or were there other kind of changes that had to be made when moving the functional descriptions of these committees and commissions from the charter to the ordinances?
It wasn't a cutting, I mean, it's not pure cutting and pasting. It was not a complex draft. But what I did, when you move a document from when you move a series of documents from paragraphs from one document to another page, I had to make sure there was nothing else in the code of ordinances that conflicted with it. But for the most part, you're going to see that it was virtually identical language. I guess I could have done a red line to show that, but it would have been very confusing. Red lines would have been different sections of the document, but it was not wasn't, as I said earlier, it was not a complex draft, but it did require the due diligence you need to do when you move documents around and sections around.
And just as a quick follow-up to that, this body put a lot of time and effort into the Civilian Review Board and beefing up the ordinance around that. When I looked at the material, it didn't look like all of that material was in the draft. So, but maybe I just missed it.
It was not in the initial draft, but I think we updated. Am I correct on that, Al? Yeah, I believe we did update it. We'll double check it and make sure that's absolutely accurate before you pass it.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alderman Morris?
Thank you. So, just going back to, parks, and piggyback off of, Alder, I almost said, bless it, Alder Franklin. So, couple of things. One, in regards to the name, right? And so when I look at this document, I'm just looking, why wouldn't we consider the name to just be exactly what I see here? Parks, Recreation, and Trees. Because that's what they do. You know, they really focus on the trees, and then they have different park recreation, like the rangers, all those different things, and then they have parks. So that's one piece. The other piece in regards to the youth department, YAR, they already have a relationship. I don't think that it's in our best interest to make a document that now has them officially, they got to come to the Parks Commission to be able to use the park, for example, right? Right now, we have something that we're doing with the kids. We're going to use Scanterbury Park. And they just use Scanterbury Park. I think by doing all of this is making another layer that's unnecessary. And so, as it was said earlier, you don't want to take away the recreation piece, because there are different types of recreation that happens within the parks, but at the same time, the youth recreation is totally different. They might have, the youth recreation department might have a 3-on-3 basketball tournament at Gulf Street Park. But why do they have to go to the commission, blah, 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 blah. So I just wanted to look at that as you were talking, Mr. Majority Leader, in regards to making sure that we kind of pull them apart, not put more work on the youth department in regards to what they want to do with their department. Just like anybody else wants to use the parks, make phone calls in the evening. We shouldn't put more layers that's going to make the youth director have to come to a meeting every month and go through all these things, because a lot of what they're doing in the parks have nothing to do with the programming that they're identifying for youth under YAR. So that's all I wanted to say. And do you have any feedback or thoughts
Well,
about that?
it's an interesting point, because the department is the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Trees. That is the department that is associated with them. And as I said to the majority leader a little while ago, the initial idea was to mesh the two so that the recreation director wouldn't have to come as a special guest, that the recreation policies, that it could be as established by the youth commission or however it's done, really become part and parcel of what the park entity, whatever you want to call it, the park commission entity does. So it would not be it's just part of their work. And that was the reason that they had the two departments that they were going to be associated with. That was the instruction I initially had in doing this. But again, that's a policy judgment, not a legal judgment. But it's very insightful. I mean, the department that is directly associated is the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Trees. So it makes some sense to try to mirror that, but I'm not going to do anything about branding. We'll leave the branding to other people to come up with a good title.
I just feel as this is pulling in another piece that really doesn't need to be pulled in because of the fact that the youth department, they use everything, you know, anything that they need for kids, that's what they do. And so to have them, in a sense, a part of this language, I just don't understand the benefit. That's all. But again, parks, they do their own type of recreation, you know, camps, all of that stuff. But then some of the camp stuff, right, is under the youth department, but they're utilizing all the different parks throughout the city to have some of those camps. So I just wanted to, as we're setting the stage for our conversation, just to be able to look at us not putting anyone or any entity in a situation where they have to do extra. Because what we're trying to do is start a new Parks Commission and be able to provide the guidance and all those different things that's needed for the parks. It almost feels like in doing that, now we're pulling other people with us. So maybe I'm reading it wrong, but the way that I read it and the way that you were explaining it, Mr. Majority Leader, that's what came to mind for me. So I guess that wasn't a question, it was a statement. It was a question because I was trying to figure it out, but I don't, so.
Yeah, I don't have a definitive answer for it.
Okay.
I'm just saying what, because it really is a policy choice. And if you think it needs to remain separated, fine. And recreation, you made the point that recreation is part of parks, but there's also recreation as part of youth. And different departments are going to have multiple jurisdictions that may cross over. They just have to figure out how to live together is what it comes down to. Whether the recreation director should be responding to the Parks Commission, I think the initial intent was it was a little expansive and it was a little different than what they currently do. And I think that was part of the thinking and expanding it so that it wasn't just for one department. I think that was part of my thinking, at least, as I did that.
Okay, so I'm all set for that. Thank you.
Are there any other, over Evelyn Rodriguez?
Thank you. And thank you for all this great work.
Thank you.
I'm going back to the abolishing of the department. In order to do away with the permanent positions.
Mhm.
What are the ramifications, or what, if any, commitment was made to the 3 permanent positions? And what can happen should we then just do these appointments by term? That would be my first question.
Well, the way to move away from the permanent membership was to abolish the commission so that we're not ending their term. We're not throwing them off the commission. We're creating a new commission. And that's why we tried to throw a few permutations in to make it different. It's not entirely different, but it is different. And so you can appoint them to the term positions if those people are interested in serving on there. You can do the same thing with other members who are presently on the current commission. But the cleanest way to do it was the clean separation by abolition, by abolishing the prior commission. That commission remains in full force and effect until the members of the new entity are approved, and the moment that occurs, they go out of business.
Because as in other boards that we have, those boards, they may be 6-year term. And the reason why is because of the expertise or whatever it is that the individual is contributing or what may be necessary for that commission. So looking at that, is that one of the reasons why the positions were permanent? Because these individuals were, if it wasn't and it's not necessary, that's good to know.
Yeah, no, it was, my instinct is, and we could never find the actual reason for it. I do think it goes back to the 19th century. And I do think it probably had to do with the transfer of land, is my guess. I always assumed, I actually did find the deputy CAO gave me a wonderful historical document on the development of parks, but didn't quite say this, but there was a lot of land acquisition, a lot of people giving land to the city, deeding land to the city, bequeathing land to the city. And I was really hoping that in that history, I would find, and because of that, they insisted on having 3 people permanently on the City Parks Commission forever and ever and ever. And I couldn't find that. I was relieved not to find it because if there was a very clear legal requirement in a trust document of some sort, in a legal document of some sort, it would have, I think it would have shown up in this history. This was not a history that was written by grade school kids. It was a pretty sophisticated review of the parks acquisition in the city. And so I don't believe that was the case. The argument on expertise is an interesting argument. You have term limits here currently in New Haven. One of the biggest debates I see all around the state, and is when you start limiting terms. There's a guy in one of my towns who was really upset because he was on the board for 40 years, and they limited it to 10, and they didn't grandfather in. They just said, when your term is up, your term is up. Now they're losing all that expertise, but most provisions in charters allow for a year off and then a year back on. But you also have to have new people come in. And so the other thing I would say to the mayor, whoever the appointing authority is you should look at the people who are on the commission that's being abolished to see whether there's people on that commission who want to continue to serve and find a way to serve the city, who bring their expertise, bring their qualifications, bring their knowledge, but they're going to be brought within a new structure of term. The break they're going to get is those who are on, not the permanent members, but the other members who are going to be off the commission will be starting anew. So if they were approaching their 10-year term on the Parks Commission, if they get appointed to the new entity, they're starting at year 1. These will not be a continuation of their prior service. So if there are people that are really talented and want to spend time there, they can start a new decade of service because they left a commission. They didn't leave a commission. The commission was abolished.
And the other advantage of having terms is that at the end of a term, a board or commission member is then reviewed and can be reappointed. And there's 3 3-year terms, I think, is the maximum allowed for boards and commissions under the charter. So with someone with a lifetime appointment, if they don't show up at any meetings, then there's nothing really that can be done, and they're taking up a seat from someone who may be willing to actively serve. So I think there is some benefit to having the review that comes with periodic reappointments.
And my last question stems around the new title of the Park Preservation and Recreation Commission. What do you define really as recreation for this commission? We have arts, music, cultural, education throughout the entire city. And many of these events always utilize the parks. So is there a definition specifically for this commission in reference to recreation? And we are looking, for example, you mentioned having the director of youth, but should it not be that we would have other directors from other departments that also utilize the parks? So
you might consider that for sure. And that would certainly further distinguish it from the current commission. And there are some communities where the Parks Commission runs summer concert series. I'm dealing with one in Middletown right now and down in Norwalk as well, where that's a very important function of that entity. And I don't think that's necessary. There's probably concerts in the parks for sure, but I'm not sure that they are park commission related functions. So you could certainly do that. You could certainly expand it to include that. And rather than make it mandatory, you could say that they should be working with all the departments that have programs that utilize the parks. Might be another way to address it.
thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I've got Alder Furlong, and then Alder Sagan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just have two questions. Want to just talk a little bit about procedure with the Parks Commission. So say that this passes and the Parks Commission is abolished. What will be their instructions as far as transferring any monies and other documents that they may have to the new organization? I don't think we know or we have any knowledge of what accounts they have, but I understand that there is a significant amount of money, what name that account is in, and what will be their instructions should this be passed, and how long would they have?
2 1/4, 30 sub C deals with that, so that the new commission stands in the shoes of the old entity, and so that everything would be transferred. We could make that more robust, but page 6.
Yeah, I did see that, but how long would they have?
Well, they go out of business, it should be moved promptly so that the day the new commission goes into business, they've got control of everything. So you have a department head who's working with this commission. That department head should make sure this happens, is what it comes down to.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it would rest on.
Because I doubt that the commission has separate bank accounts, the city has accounts. And so the department.
Attorney, I have no idea. I don't think any of us have any idea
Well,
where these accounts
I
are.
don't know, you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I would assume
I
that.
was just thinking, they would all, I think, be probably the controller's
Yeah.
office, because I believe under the charter, the controller has control of all city bank accounts. Now, if the Parks Department or Parks Commission has an account, it would be, to the best of my knowledge, under the controller's office, although I don't know for sure one way or the other.
If they have any accounts that are not within the city system, then they're operating outside the parameters of our rules in the city. So we can make it more clear. I didn't think it was necessary that since you have departments, it's an entity of the city, that the administrators would do what they need to do to make sure that the name of the commission is changed, any reporting requirements are changed, all those things would be changed administratively. I didn't think it was needed to be addressed in the ordinance. We could be more.
Okay. No, I just don't want to leave any loopholes.
Yeah.
Just in case when we finish, and we say, well, who's supposed to do this? And my other question is, in the charter, I think it's section 1 where it talks about the boards and commissions. It is not listed here, and it probably doesn't need to be, but I'm asking if it should, that all boards and commissions, all members of boards and all commissioners are appointed by the mayor and then confirmed by the Board of Alders.
The charter governs, it doesn't need to be in the
It doesn't need to
ordinances.
be, okay.
So remember, Mr. Majority Leader, the commissions are still created by the charter. The charter appointment authority is in the charter. We're just putting the entity, the meat on the bones of the entity in the code of ordinances. So the charter provisions all apply to appointment, to elimination, to the end of their terms, however it goes, it still applies to everybody.
Okay.
And it applies to boards and commissions that weren't created by the charter. The charter applies to every board and commission and every entity that is created either by charter or by ordinance.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay, I think that answers my third question. I won't ask it. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alder Seven?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies for being late. I had a quick, just point of clarification. I wanted to understand, is the red line, this maybe to chair or staff, is the red line version that we have in our packet, the text that's in black is not current text from the language from the charter. It's also new. Some of it is new text. Is that correct?
So the red line version in your packet is what is before the committee tonight to be amended by the committee. So all it is a black line of the submission that's then redlined with the changes.
I see. Okay. Thank you. That's all.
Alder Marchant?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question follows up on Alder Saban's question. So when we look at this item proposed to be substituted for what was an original packet. We have the order. This is page 1 of 36 or page 27 of 58. Right, so most of that is red because the order hadn't been written, so now it's been written, and that's what it says. That's the actual legislation. And then it ends with, as detailed below and attached in Schedule A. So I take what follows to be Schedule A. At least that's the intention.
I didn't draft the latest version, so I would leave it to Misty.
Okay. So we should probably make sure that, because the header for a lot of these pages is Title 3 Code of General Ordinances, Chapter 19 Parks, Recreation, and Trees, which doesn't actually apply until you get later on in the document. So it doesn't apply until you get to page 16 and 36. And so we probably ought to replace that header with the word Schedule A and use it throughout, so that it's clear what we're actually if we do substitute, we want to substitute the correct thing.
Yeah,
So-
the actual,
Because where we're starting with chapter 2 1/4
that is correct.
and not chapter 19. So that comes later. So I
That is
think,
absolutely right.
but the header that fits for all of the subsequent pages, regardless of section, is Schedule A.
Mhm.
So we'd probably want to just make that amendment to the amendment when the time comes. I just want to make sure that's,
Yeah, and this section of the Code of Ordinances will be called, it should be called, excuse me, boards and commissions required by charter. So that should be clear. That was in the initial proposal. It's all been crossed out here, but that should be the title of the section. That's what section 2.5 is.
so we'll have a
So make
little
sure
more
that's done, yeah.
housekeeping to do
Yeah, we can
tonight
clean that up.
to
Yeah.
make sure it gets done correctly. Okay. Great, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you very much for
Thank you.
participating.
And if you need me, I'm happy to, I can't stay, but I've got a 7:30 council meeting. No, I Zoom, don't worry, I will not, I'll be driving to Norway, no, it's a Zoom meeting. But if you have any questions, call, or Misty, I'm sure will be able to deal with it, and she and I can commiserate tomorrow,
Thank you, Attorney.
and the court counsel.
Thank you,
Thanks.
Attorney.
Appreciate it. Sorry, everybody.
So now I'll ask if there are any members of the public present wishing to testify on this item. Second, have any members of the public wishing to testify? And for a third and final time, is there anyone present wishing to testify? Seeing none. We'll move on to item 2 on our agenda, and I'll ask the members forward with their name and address for the record.
Alder Frank Prudenti, Ward 15, 67 Downing Street.
Thank you, Alder. Please begin your presentation.
So I drafted this as a conversation starter because my ward, as other wards do, are struggling from a number of different parking issues. We have streets where we have cars on 3 wheels, cars that have been sitting for months and months at a time, to where it impacts not only the street sweeping schedules, but also one of the bigger complaints I got when I ran for Alder was that tenants were coming home from work and not finding places to park on their streets. A lot of the renters don't have driveway access. And in my ward, and in Fairhaven in general, we have a lot of illegal auto repair shops. So while they're working on cars will end up on the street, no plates, sometimes no tires, no doors. We have box trucks that sit with 3 wheels on it, with the 4th wheel balanced precariously on a jack, right behind a school, and when I was calling to get stuff taken care of, I was noticing that it was taking a 72-hour window where it would be identified, and then you know, sometimes it wouldn't get taken care of at all. So, so I thought it would be sensible if we shortened that window. The second piece of it was, we have a serious issue with our police response time because of the shortage in policing. And a lot of times they weren't getting to these calls and cars were just sitting. So, you know, discussions were had to possibly move it into the purview of traffic transportation department. So that was it. Parking, as you know, like before COVID, some steps were taken to kind of take it easy on people. I understand compassion. I just don't think compassion without accountability works very well. I think human nature is to take kindness for weakness. And if you drive through Ward 15 at night, you'll see the struggles that we're dealing with as far as parking. Cars park on sidewalks. We have entire streets where cars park up on the sidewalk. People can't even walk down the street. They block fire hydrants. They park around the corner so that the buses can't get around the corner. I mean, you know, it causes a lot of safety risks. So we need an expedited process to remove vehicles that shouldn't be on our road, parked on our streets, you know, for a myriad of reasons. You know, I know a couple of things have come up. You know, we don't currently have a contract with a tow company in the city. And during COVID, we weren't tagging and towing. And I think people knew that. And it's just got to the point where we need to start taking a serious look at how are we handling our traffic issue. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any members that have any questions? Alder Pillow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm wondering if there's anyone from city staff who is prepared to talk along these lines.
I see you looking at me.
Oh, because
And also Mr. Hoffman is here from Transportation Traffic Department.
Ah,
Steve
So,
okay.
and Cindy was here earlier.
okay, I didn't know this either.
And I also saw Mr. Madsen at some point. Madam Chair, perhaps city staff can come?
Yeah, that would be helpful. Please come forward, I apologize. Good evening. If you please state your name and address of the record, and then please proceed.
Eric Hoffman, Deputy Director, Transportation, Traffic and Parking.
And Patricia King, Corporation Counsel, 32 Vista Terrace in New Haven.
Thank you. Alder, did you want to repeat your question?
So yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay.
So we heard the testimony from Alder Redenti, but we haven't heard the city side. We do know that there is a problem with towing, with ticketing, with police shortage. I think my question more specifically would be, my concern is with the collective bargaining unit, with the police department, with the transferring of any responsibilities from the police to TTP, if that would cause any issues there, and what we need to do to address the issue in Fairhaven.
If I may, I'm certainly understand the issue that Alder Redente is facing in his ward, and I imagine in other wards throughout the city. I saw this proposed ordinance yesterday, so I haven't spent a lot of time looking at it, but we do have another city ordinance on abandoned motor vehicles, which is, I think, if I remember correctly, 18-36. We have a definition of abandoned motor vehicles in that ordinance. And I think that we could try to integrate this proposal into that ordinance, or look at what we need to modify in that ordinance to create a comprehensive ordinance. I think Alder Furlow, you're correct on the collective bargaining issues, and I have not spoken with labor relations about this. This is not something that I would directly deal with, but certainly it's an issue to be considered. The other issue, I think, is who's going to be responsible for impounding these vehicles, and notice to the vehicle owners, and how we work that out. And there is also a state statute, 14-150 on abandoned motor vehicles. So I think this requires sort of a comprehensive look at our current ordinances so we can address the problem, because I certainly think it's a problem that needs to be addressed. But I think we want to make sure that what we do, we're not inconsistent with other ordinances, and certainly not inconsistent with state statute. And we'd be more than happy to work on this. I know Attorney Bowler, who advises transportation, traffic, and parking, is swamped right now trying to get ARPA agreements out, because he's our ARPA lawyer. And he is swamped trying to get those agreements out. So he really hasn't had a lot of time to devote to this recently. And as I said, I was just made aware of it yesterday, but we're more than happy to work with Alder Redente and anyone else on the board who wants to join us on this.
That ARPA deadline is coming up. We're getting nervous.
Oh, we're all nervous.
We have our chair of finance sitting here when you said.
We're all nervous. It's and with the year end and people on vacation, and it's really crunch time on the contract side for the city.
And my final question would be to our deputy director. What is the process for TTP for ticketing and towing? I know you do it for residential permit parking.
No,
You don't. You have.
we
Because
have.
Yeah.
So most often vehicles are towed once they have been left on a city street and have not moved within more than 500 feet after 72 hours. And how that practically works is that the vehicle doesn't cross over another street. So in other words, it doesn't, if it's picture it on a block, a square block. If it moves to the other side of the street, technically it really hasn't moved. If it moves across an intersecting street, it is moved. If it's moved over to a parallel block, it's moved. So, and just to give some perspective.
I'm sorry, this is a legally registered car?
Yes.
Can't park on a public street for more than 72 hours?
That's correct. That's what the ordinance is. Yes. And what's being proposed and under state statute is a vehicle can be removed off of a street after 24 hours. So that's the change that is being proposed. So far this year, this calendar year, we've towed off the city streets about 1,300 vehicles. I'm looking for my chart, and I can tell you exactly how many we've done for 72 hours. 203 vehicles have been towed off the city streets for violating the 72 hours.
And these are cars that are legally registered, or?
Some of them could be legally registered, yes. Some of them may not be registered. TT&P doesn't have direct access to registration. We go by the fact that the vehicle is there. So they could be legally registered. However, under the ordinance, if the vehicle doesn't move, we can tow the vehicle.
So if I don't have a driveway and I'm parked and I go on vacation for 4 days, I can come back and my car is gone?
Yes, technically, yes, you could. But generally, we don't have the resources. We're not going out. Generally, these vehicles are brought to our attention by the folks that live in the neighborhood.
So somebody who doesn't like me can say, he hasn't moved his car in 4 days. He's the older. So it's car.
Unfortunately, we do wade into those neighbor disputes, yes. We've gotten fairly good at being able to pick out that is what is occurring, because they seem to find the same fact pattern.
And where does TTP tow the car?
So we utilize the police's tow list. So we call a record company on a rotation list that's maintained by the Office of the Chief of Police. And from there, that vehicle is removed off of the city streets and it goes to that private property, the garages. And then the garage is the one that then charges the person for the tow and releases the vehicle.
And I just want to just clarify my last question, Madam Chair.
Yes, absolutely.
And I don't think Alder Redenti, you're talking about cars that are legally parked in areas. You're talking about cars that are on sidewalks, that are not licensed, that are on cinder blocks. That's what this would be addressing.
Yes, sir.
So that is a piece of ordinance that we need. Because if we come upon a vehicle, we're coming into the winter time, we come upon a vehicle that say it's got its windows open, it's got 4 inches of snow in it. In my definition, that's an apparent abandoned vehicle. TT&P parking enforcement officers do not have the authority under the ordinance to remove that vehicle until after 72 hours. If we go with the definition and merge it with the other definitions in the ordinance as an apparent abandoned vehicle, then once the parking enforcement officer comes upon that vehicle, they would then have the authority to be able to remove that vehicle off the city streets. That's the same in the case of the vehicles that, people have stole the tires and all of a sudden it's sitting on milk crates. Mm-hmm. We have to start a timing process so that vehicle can sit there for 72 hours. The repair shops that leave their vehicles on the city street with no apparent registration, no apparent marker plate, we have to start a timer. However, if we were given the ability to say, okay, this is a apparent abandoned vehicle, it's got no marker plate on it, has no apparent registration information visible, even a suspect temporary plate, then we'd be able to remove that vehicle off the city streets. It gives us a tool to be able to actively get these vehicles off the street in a more timely manner. Because generally what happens is by the time we get called, it's already been sitting there for several weeks. Mm-hmm. And then we get there, we start 72 hours, and then we get the call, well, why hasn't it been removed? And in the 72-hour window is an optimistic window. It could take us almost a week to get it removed. Because we get into types of vehicles that the tow companies drive by and go, no, we're not towing that. Mm-hmm. So then we got to go to the next tow company, and they go by. RVs, boats, those sometimes take us 2 weeks to convince a tow company and assistance with DPW to get off the streets.
And you don't have a system to run plates to know where the car, so you'll just go by it sitting there for a length of time that is unreasonable.
That's correct. At this time we don't have, but we're in the plans of changing systematic different systems and things like that.
Can the police tow immediately if the car is not registered? Because they have the ability.
I believe so, because it's a violation of state statute.
I'll yield here. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have Alder Morrison on me.
Yes, thank you. So my question is in regards to this this recommendation with TT&P having this authority. Would TT&P and the police department be working like in tandem with one another? Like, does this allow TT&P to do it, but if a police officer happens to see the car, earlier than TT&P, would they both be able to do the same function? Because the bottom line is you're trying to take this from 72 to 24 hours. Right now, in reading this, it seems like the police have more authority to do something, but it's still the 72-hour requirement.
Yeah. So parking enforcement officers go under the authority of the city ordinances. Mm-hmm. My suggestion would be is that if we continue the conversations of fleshing out this ordinance, that we put it in line with 14150. So we would move the conditions in 14150 that talk about apparent abandoned vehicles, hazards and hindrances to traffic, apparently unregistered in the 24-hour period. It would be parking enforcement officers would be able to do it similarly to police officers. Okay. So it would not, I don't believe we should take one responsibility from one city department that can do it now under state statute and just solely give it to another.
Right.
That
was my question.
Yes. Yes.
Is
Our
looking
suggestion-
to do that, but go ahead.
Our suggestion would be that we move this conversation forward to more align the changes with 14-150. So we could, but yes, so it would still be the police and TTP from TTP's position.
So everybody will have
Yes.
the authority, instead of just calling one entity and trying to wait on that.
Yes.
There could be two. Okay, yep, that was, my question. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I have Alder C. Rodriguez and then Alder E. Rodriguez on the line.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the questions is parking on sidewalk in public spaces. Would that be something that you could handle in less than 72 hours? If you get a call of folks there's enough space on the street for them to park their cars, but they're actually driving on the sidewalks and then parking where they're impeding the walkway of residents. That's one piece of it. And then if not, they're parking on that strip where the grass is also there. Would that be able to be moved in less than 72 hours? Because it's illegal to park on the sidewalk.
Our interpretation from TTMP is any vehicle that is in violation of the city parking ordinances can be towed. So the extreme example is somebody's meter just expires 5 minutes. Technically, we could tow that vehicle away from the meter. We don't. We generally only start thinking about towing vehicles for the what we call major violations within the TTMP is parking on the sidewalks. That grass strip, the tree line, we consider that part of the city right of way and part of the sidewalk. On the other side of the sidewalk, that starts to become folks' front lawn, that becomes a zoning issue. But parking at handicap spaces on the curbside, we consider that a major violation. Parking in front of a hydrant is a major violation. Taking up more than one of the marked spaces, if it's marked out, that's a major violation. Blocking a driveway is a major violation. So any one of those major violations, we generally do start to consider towing the vehicles. Currently, right now, we're trying to use a progressive approach, particularly for the sidewalk. And I know that we had conversations all about that. So what we generally, if we have the resources available, we can go into the neighborhoods. We issue written warnings. The next time, we try to send the same enforcement officers again. If they recognize the same vehicle, now we start issuing a citation with a fine attached to it. And if the third or fourth time is happening, we find this vehicle again, we then start to weigh the fact of whether we're going to tow the vehicle or not. But any one of those major violations, we have the belief that we could tow the vehicle.
And Madam Chair?
Yes.
Quickly, two more questions. When you have businesses, automotive businesses that are doing the same thing, and you get a call, that's a quick going to that business and saying, you have to move these vehicles from the sidewalks, because again, they're impeding.
Yes, it's the same thing. It's my understanding that a motor vehicle repair shop is not supposed to be using any of the right-of-way sidewalks, curbside parking to store their vehicles. And one of the things that we're also starting to look at is vehicles that apparently don't have any registration on it that are in violation. We're going to start removing off the city streets. So that's one of the things we're finding, and we usually find it around those repair shops where they put a vehicle out on the curb and not too swift. They put the vehicle in violation. You know, put it in a crosswalk. They put it next to a hydrant, and then so yeah.
Last comment, Madam Chair, and I'll make it quickly. And in respect to the hydrant, if you have two vehicles, you have the hydrant in the middle, and automatically two cars are parked there, because we are seeing that, as the alder mentioned, we are seeing that cars are parking in between the hydrant. My concern is, we gotta get those cars, either educate them that you can't park that in the event that there's a fire in their front lawn, because it's near their house, to be getting a ticket as well. Is that something, that possibility, as you're doing the canvassing in the areas, if you find two vehicles that are so close to a hydrant, to get enforcement at that time?
Yes, the rule of thumb about hydrants that we're using is if the hydrant is clearly blocked by the vehicle, we will consider towing the vehicle. We also have been working off a list with the fire department of particular hydrants that have been targeted by the different firehouses that are constantly blocked and constantly blocked by the same vehicle. So so far this year, we've towed like 5 vehicles away from hydrants. I mean, we're just getting started, but we're about 50% higher in hydrant enforcement than we were over last year, just issuing citations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll circle back with my next question for my colleagues.
Evelyn Rodriguez, something?
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, as we talk about flushing the ordinance, and we can look at additionally to everything my colleagues have mentioned, but we also have the no parking from the corners. We're seeing a big problem regarding that. My question stems around the vandalism and crime related to these vehicles. That should everything go in terms of the responsibility of TT and PD, will they be able to handle in terms of the exploring if a car was stolen and other things that could be factors as to why a car is left in a particular space? And lastly, I just want to talk, we mentioned about the abandoned, what about the trucks and the big vehicles? And also the fact that we have a city that's growing. We have many, many more renters, and they're gonna need parking spaces. I know that my colleagues is specifically focused on those cars that are abandoned, but looking at the whole as we flush this ordinance. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
I mean, I think Alder has a point that some of these vehicles take up the curbside parking. So to start at the iceberg of the curbside parking availability, if we're able to more actively and quickly remove those vehicles off the city streets, I think we'll start to free up. It's not going to solve the problem of the multifamily houses that now have 3 and 4 vehicles per unit, where they were designed to have 1 or maybe 2. But it will help alleviate some of the pressures in some of the more growing areas of the city.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question regarding the activity in reference to the police department and your department regarding a vehicle that may have been left that was stolen, who would look into that to see if that in fact was a vehicle that may have been stolen that was left? If the department established to do this.
Yeah, we haven't clearly looked at system changes we'd have to do for registration. But I think the ability to remove vehicles off, if another department in the city has the ability to remove vehicles off the city street a lot sooner, it would help pinpoint, at least from the police department's aspect, of where some of these vehicles are being left on a quicker basis. A vehicle that's left on the city street that we start timing after a week or so for 72 hours, that turns out to be stolen, that increases the time frame for the police to figure out where that vehicle came from. If we shrink the window down closer from TT&P's perspective, we're able to help out the police department on that aspect.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any other questions?
Just have one quick question if I may, Madam Chair.
Absolutely.
What time does TT&P close as far as their towing? So the police department is 24 hours. We can always reach the police, but what time does TT&P close?
So TT&P pretty much is Monday through Saturday, 9 to 5. Tuesday through Friday, we're staffed out in the street until 9 o'clock at night.
But you do tickets past 5 o'clock.
Yes, that's correct.
And so wait, has something changed? Because I know we were able to call up until, I thought it was up until 10 o'clock if we had an issue with cars parked in residential zones.
So you probably can call the evening shift supervisor desk after 5 o'clock. I've been there 2 years and pretty much 9 o'clock is when the evening shift ends.
So at 9, so from 9 o'clock on, it will roll over to the next morning.
Yes.
Unless we get the deputy director's phone number. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Point of order, Madam Chair. Alder Furlow, you mentioned about the police department doing the enforcement in reference to the vehicles 24 hours. When in fact, correct me, Deputy, if the instruction is that Monday through Friday, TT and PD do the 9 to 5. So calls should be going into the city's department instead of directly to the police department regarding the activity of the vehicles.
So I think,
Thank you,
Madam
Madam
Chair, my colleague made a point of clarification on point of order.
Yeah, thank you for the correction.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, thank you so much for your presentation, and we'll open it up to the public.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public present wishing to testify on this item? Are there any members of the public present wishing to testify on this item? And for the third and final time, are there any members of the Are there any members of the public present wishing to testify on this item? Seeing none, a motion is appropriate. Chair Curley.
Madam Chair, I move that we close the public portion on these two items.
Second is moved in second. All those in discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We have closed the public portion of this committee meeting. Alder Furlow.
Madam Chair, I move item 1.
Second.
Item is moved in second. Discussion on the item. Alder Furlow.
Madam Chair, I move that we amend by substitution the item that is before us on item 1 with the packet that has been provided to us by staff. And it begins at page 27 of 50 or page 1 of 36.
Second.
Oh, apologies. Okay, the amendment has been made and second. And discussion on the amendment only.
Oh, yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So no, I'm not the maker of this. This actually came out of a working group that was staffed by Attorney Mednick and with help of our court counsel and a few alders. And so, but I think we're going to have some other amendments that we're going to need to make in regards to this. So we'll have more discussion in just a moment.
Alder Mershon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to move an amendment making some corrections to this substitute amendment.
Is there a second?
Second.
I don't, the amendment, subsequent amendment has been made second, discussion, Alderman Shaw.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the changes that I'm proposing would be to remove the header that says Title III Code of General Ordinances, Chapter 19, Parks, Recreation, and Trees, and to replace that with the word Schedule A. Actually, it should not appear on the page that has the actual order. There should be no heading. It should just be that order. But the subsequent pages, the rest of the packet that is the content of the substitute amendment, is the Schedule A that's referenced in line 39 of page 27. And so I think that should be the appropriate heading for the remainder of the packet. And also, you know, the red line is for our benefit, but the final version would not have red lines on it. It would be clean. And then on page 32 of 58, my amendment would correct that section numbering that was discussed with the attorney. So in line 219, it would say section 2¼ authorized procedure. And then in line 226, it would say section 2¼ -25 through 2¼ reserved. Those are the changes to the substitute amendment that my amendment makes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Alderman. I will speak in favor of this subsequent amendment, as it will clean up, and do some housekeeping in the document. Any other discussion on the amendment?
I do, I just,
Alderman Phillips.
thank you, Madam Chair. Just for a point of clarification, I'm just looking at 225, section 2 1/4. Sorry, my eyes are leaving. 24 through, which says reserved. So would we need to change this number also?
Yes, in fact, I did mention
Is that
that.
what you said?
Section 2¼ -25
Through,
through 2¼ -29 reserved.
okay. And Madam Chair, I just keep looking over at our staff to make sure she's got everything.
Oh, it was, Alderman Morrison.
The Alderman Morrison seconded it?
Yeah.
Seconded it.
I'll second again, just in case.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion? Alderman Morrison.
Just a clarification. So in regards to that whole discussion about the title for the Parks Committee, or whatever they're gonna call it, is that a part of the amendment from the majority leader, or has that been discussed at all? Is that something that we can or should discuss now, or is that something that should happen later on, and then when we get to the second reading, substitute my amendment?
That's an excellent question. I think an amendment would need to be made to change the order. I don't believe that you know what, Alderman Shaw.
I'll just speak to my intent, Madam Chair, which is simply to make the corrections that are obvious and clear. They're not policy-related discussions. And so my recommendation, if it makes sense, would be to accomplish those changes, which would be to vote on my amendment, to Alderman Furlow's amendment, which they should vote on, and then we've corrected the kind of technical issues that need to be corrected. And then I think we can have policy discussions around that item in particular, where I think there might be more discussion. That would be my recommendation.
So when is this happen? Later? That's, I think that's kind of like
In
my
a few moments,
question.
Madam Chair, we need to vote on this item
Okay.
as it's been amended, and then once it is amended, we can go back and talk about other things that we would like to change. But right now, we are voting to talk about our red line version with items being cleaned up.
That's why I asked for a point of clarification, because so many moving parts. But okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, seeing none, we'll vote on the amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any acceptance. We are back to the item as amended.
The amendment as amendment.
Thank you. We are back to the amendment as amended. Alder Marshall.
I encourage colleagues to vote yes on the amendment as amended.
Any further discussion? All right, see none. All those in favor of the amended amendment, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are back to the item as amended.
Right.
Aha. Any discussion? All right.
Madam Chair, this would be the time to make a policy or name change.
Oh, okay. Well, I have a name, but I'll get the name.
Well,
The name to me, even though I don't know if you can do it, the name that makes most sense to me is the Parks, Recreation, and Trees Commission. I mean, it's simple, it's written everywhere else, but it really speaks to parks, it really speaks to recreation that happens related to the parks and trees. Now, the other piece is, how do we change the initial intent that our attorney identified in having the youth department involved in this? Because as I was saying earlier, putting that extra layer on the youth department to have to be a part of the parks department, because that's the reason why years ago, we're no longer the Department of Youth and Parks Recreation, right?
so Madam Chair, I think what our colleagues should do, our President Pro Tem, is pick a name and then have it seconded, and then we can have discussion.
Okay, well, I did pick the name.
Okay,
I
so,
did pick it.
if she would
It
repeat
was-
that, then we can have it
yes.
seconded.
So
Madam
the
Chair.
name that I'm looking at, the Commission of Parks, Recreation, and Trees.
Do I hear a second?
Thing I'm reading right here.
Second.
I just got, thank you, Alder, Steve Rodriguez. Discussion on the amendment.
So going back to what I said, the reason why I think that this name is clear and simple, it allows everyone to be in their own sections, right? But at the same time, the other piece of it, I just get very nervous about needing to pull in a whole nother department into this commission. You good? Okay. Into this commission, whereas they got their own business over here. So it definitely needs to be split, because, I mean, a lot of departments, culture and tourism, they use the parks, for their different events. So they just did it with the tree lighting. Do they need to be a part of the commission, the Parks Commission and all of that in order to do that? So I don't know how you do it, but this is my discussion, and I want us as a team to try to figure that piece out. So that's my discussion.
I have Alder Marshall and Alder Fellow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Alder Morrison that we shouldn't pull in the youth department or require that the director of the youth department be working with this commission. I'm hesitant to call it the commission of the Parks, Recreation, and Trees Commission, because I read through the section 19, which lays out how the department is defined and the roles of the commission, and they don't really have much, from what I could read, influence over the tree maintenance operations of that department. That the commission is really about the parks and about the activities in the parks. It is not really about the trees. That's a separate function of the department with its own deputy director and our own gripes about it for sure, and lists and such. But from what I can tell, reading the documents, the commission has not had much to say about the trees, unless the trees were in the park. in which case they would. So I don't think we need to name the commission to be identical to how the department's named, because there's not 100% overlap. So my preference would be, the Parks and Recreation Commission, for example, which would, I think, capture what its mission is and not lead someone to conclude that the commission has authority over trees when I don't think it does. So that's my feedback. Madam Chair.
I have Alder Friendly on the queue, and then Alder E. Rodriguez.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to offer a friendly amendment on the name. And I think we should, I think what we would need to do, just as a point of discussion before I make a motion, a friendly amendment. If we're going to talk about taking the youth department out, then we would need to do that separately. Because it is in there, and then we'll need to make another motion to remove the youth department from the Parks Commission. I think we should do that as a separate motion. So our President Pro Tem, after this, if you accept my
That's your friendly amendment?
No, because I think we need to do that separately. I think we should do the title first and then move to eliminate the youth department as a separate motion, just to keep it clean. I would offer as a friendly amendment to perhaps consider Commission on Parks, Programs, and Recreational Facilities. Commission on Parks, Programs, and Recreational Facilities. You can put the commission in the front, or you can put the commission in the back. And so it would take care of the Parks Department, its programs, and really what the commission is in charge of are the facilities on the grounds of the parks.
Grounds, okay. And that's where I was getting the old tree came from.
Technically, it's up to the maker of the amendment to
Yeah.
accept it or not.
So say it one more time, but I think
Let me see if I can do it again.
I'm agreeing.
Commission on Parks, Programs, and Recreational Facilities. Or we can say Parks, Programs, and Recreational Facilities Commission. Or Commission on Parks, Programs, and Recreational Facilities.
I think I like the Commission on Parks, Programs, and Recreational Facilities. And then as we're looking at that title, after we go through that process, then we'll look to do the whole thing about eliminating the youth department from this document as presented.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, yep. So I accept that friendly amendment. You all wrote it down? 'Cause I
I
did.
got it.
We just need a discussion on
Okay.
that.
So the amendment has been made. Second, can you? Okay, just go, so, discussion on the amendment. All right. Oh, well, I apologize. I've, Alder Rodriguez on the queue.
I am in support of the friendly amendments that have been made toward the name. And in terms of the Article 5, Section 2¼ -30A, the sentence, the commission shall advise and consult with the director of the Parks Department
We're not there yet.
and with
Oh.
city directors.
Point of
and-
order, Alder
Okay, we're not there yet.
We're
Okay,
not quite
okay,
there
we're
yet.
not there yet. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing Alder Mershon.
I'm willing to support it, although I think Parks and Rec is smoother, easier to say than the more descriptive but somewhat clunky version that the majority leader put forward. But clunk is fine with me. I'm a clunky guy myself, and I'm happy to support it if my version isn't preferred. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alder Morrison.
Yes, I guess for me, the whole Parks and Recreation just brings me back to 1986. We might as well just kept it like that, or back to 2014 when we changed it. And so I like this better because it sounds newer versus then sounding like we're just going back to the old thing that we had. Even though this is not the old commission, it just sounds like the old department. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that. But thank you.
Alder Phillips.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to call to the committee's attention again, the whole reason why we're changing the name is that we're creating, in essence, a new commission, abolishing the old commission, reestablishing a new one with a new name and some tweaks in what they do. And so the attorney was clear that he thought it was prudent for us to have a name change that was significant enough or different enough from what was previous. And so I'm in support of this long, clunky name.
Excellent. All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll vote on the amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are back to the item as amended. Alderman Shawn.
Madam Chair, I'd like to propose amendment to the lines 2, 3, 4 through 2, 3, 6. Second.
Item has been moved to the second discussion. Alderman Shawn.
So this is the text in section 2¼ -30 establishment that lays out what department heads would be required to work closely with this commission. And so my amendment would strike, this is page 6 of 36 or 32 of 38. And so I'm trying to accomplish what colleagues have already identified needs to be accomplished. And so the current sentence says, the commission shall advise and consult with the director of the Parks Department and the director of Youth and Recreation Departments pertaining to duties of the directors and to the conduct of their respective departments. I would remove the words "and the director of Youth and Recreation Departments," after which you would read pertaining to the duties of the director and the conduct of the department. I believe that those changes effectively remove the portion that colleagues have said we should remove, and I encourage colleagues to vote yes on this amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Alderman Stevens.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder whether, question to the maker of the amendment, I wonder whether under section 2¼ 32 role commission policymaking role, we might want to add to the amendment utilizing the advice of the director of youth and recreation, line 285 and 286 on page 7 of 36.
I would accept it as a friendly amendment if it were being offered.
I would like to propose a potentially friendly amendment to remove the words "and" in parentheses II recreational use of the parklands of the city, utilizing the advice of the director of youth and recreation.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Oh, my fault.
I accept that as a friendly amendment.
Yeah, there. Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
And I think, Madam Chair, we're just looking to make sure it's not listed
Yeah.
anywhere else.
Alderman Martha?
So can we, because in us sitting here trying to quickly see the different areas where it says the Parks Directive, can we make, well, can I make an amendment, I guess, or a friendly,
Point of order, colleagues, I'm having trouble hearing. Alderman Morrison.
that we just make the blanket statement to say anywhere in here that says anything related to the not Parks Director, but the Youth Director, that be omitted, because we might miss something. Like I didn't see what Alder Saban just identified. And if he wasn't here, we might have passed this and that would have still been sitting in there. So is there a way that we can, I don't know if that's an amendment, I don't know what that is, but we need to be able to allow staff to go through the document thoroughly to take anything out of there that relates to the yard director. So is that an amendment? I don't know.
I'm not granting it. Alderman.
Madam Chair, I think the spirit of the amendment would cover removing the youth director from any section past this that we may have missed because the amendment was made to remove it from the Parks Commission.
I'd like to welcome our colleague from Ward 3, Alder Rickford, who's joined us. Alder Rashad.
I agree. That is indeed my intent. My intent is to remove mention of the director of the youth department from this document. And so that's my intent, including the two specific instances that we are definitely naming in my amendment.
Okay. Any further discussion? Okay.
Wait, whatever you want me,
Put it clear.
I hope I'm doing this right. In terms of the departments, where does the recreation really lie? Because we have the commission, but if we look at the city departments, whose is the responsibility in terms of looking at recreation? Because I see here that we have the director of youth and recreation departments. So if we can shed some light on this, please.
Yep, so we have yard, which is youth and recreation department, which is which falls under the umbrella of the youth director. Then we have the parks department, which was now reorganized again at our last budget.
Yes.
And within that department are the ranger programs and programs that are recreational within the parks. This may even include the skateboard park.
Okay.
And so, but that is something that is different than what the youth department that's not under the youth department's banner. So these are activities that are only within our parks under the direct leadership of the Parks Department.
Thank you very much. So thank you, Madam Chair, because now the title is even, for this commission, is even more significant. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you, colleagues, for a fruitful and helpful discussion. So we'll move to vote on the amendment. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? That's the item as amended. Discussion. Alder Rashad. Alder Perla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say good job to everyone.
Yeah.
We are appreciative of our council and to our attorney, to the working group, to our staff who worked very hard to give us this red line version. And we're glad that we're finally able to get this out of our city charter, putting it into our code of ordinances so that in the future, we don't have to send it to the vote of the whole city to make small changes. I think it's a good move, and it's condensing our city charter, which was something that we wanted to do, and making it more updated for the members of our public to be able to participate on boards and commissions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Alder Rashad.
And I have the pleasure of thanking our colleague, the majority leader, our alder from the 27th Ward, who very ably led us through the charter revision process recently and has been very diligent in making sure that we follow through on the mandates that were part of that revision process, this being a big one. So I want to thank him for his leadership, and I want to thank colleagues for their spirited discussion, and I recommend we all vote yes. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll move to a vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The item passed. Alder Frilla,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to give leave to withdraw to item number 2.
Second.
item has been moved in second discussion. Alder Frilla,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I understand what this ordinance amendment is looking to do, but we're not quite at prime time yet. I think giving this a leave to withdraw is going to allow our colleague to circle back around with the appropriate departments, look at state and city ordinances, and pull together another version of this that would perhaps come before this committee that we'll be able to vote on. But right now, there are just too many too many gaps in it for us to be able to pass it as is. And if we were to try to do amendments on it, it would stay in committee forever. And so we need to have a different version of this. I do want to say that I am concerned with TTP moving into police matters, especially since they're not able to read license plates. And I don't know that we want to have TTP reading license plates and towing cars, unless we can see how in sync they'll be with the police department. But right now, that is a police matter, and we should keep it as is until we can figure out what to do with it. Thank you, Madam Chair. I hope my colleagues will support giving this a leave to withdraw. Thank you.
Alder Rashad,
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm raised my hand to speak in favor of the motion. I commend Alder Redenti for taking initiative on this, but I believe that more research is needed and collaboration with city staff to make sure that the solution we might adopt would actually solve the problem and not create more problems. And so look forward to hearing back in the future about what that collaboration yields. But I think at this time it's appropriate to give it leave to withdraw. Thank you, Madam Chair.
thank you, colleague. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's move to vote. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? The item passed. Alder Frilla,
Madam Chair, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
I will move that we adjournment has been moved in second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? We are adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. Good.
It's time to go get a pizza.
Yeah.
Close till 9. Michelangelo, you know what? I'm gonna do Sally's. Sally's close to
Was the summer.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
happened.
No, Michelangelo, is that the one over
Derby Ave.
Derby Avenue?
Derby and Forest.
I've heard good things about it.
This summer.
I've never been there despite the fact that I live there.
So you